Victor Harrington was born into a world of unimaginable wealth and privilege. The Harrington family was synonymous with power and influence, a dynasty that had maintained its grip on the financial and political sectors for generations. Victor's upbringing was a carefully curated experience, designed to groom him into the perfect heir to the Harrington legacy. His early years were spent in the sprawling Harrington estate, a palatial mansion nestled in the lush countryside, far from the noise and distractions of the city. The estate itself was a testament to the family's wealth: endless manicured lawns, opulent gardens, and a private lake that shimmered under the sunlight. From a young age, Victor was exposed to the elite circles of society. His parents, Charles and Victoria Harrington, were key figures in this world, hosting lavish parties attended by politicians, celebrities, and business magnates. These events were more than just social gatherings. They were power plays, where alliances were forged and deals were made. As a child, Victor would watch from the sidelines, absorbing the subtle dynamics of power and influence. His father, a stern and imposing figure, was a master at navigating these complexities, and Victor admired him deeply, aspiring to one day command the same respect and authority. Victor's education was meticulously planned. He attended the finest private schools where he was taught by the best tutors money could buy. His curriculum was extensive, covering not just academics, but also the arts, languages, and the nuances of high society etiquette. By the time he reached adolescence, Victor was fluent in multiple languages and had developed a keen understanding of the world's economic and political landscapes. His education was complemented by lessons in leadership, negotiation, and strategy, skills that would serve him well in the business world. Despite his privileged upbringing, Victor was not immune to the pressures that came with being the heir to the Harrington Empire. His parents' expectations were immense, and the weight of the family legacy was a constant presence in his life. Failure was not an option, and Victor was determined to live up to the Harrington name. He spent his teenage years working tirelessly, often isolating himself from his peers to focus on his studies and personal development. This relentless drive set him apart from others his age, who were more interested in enjoying the luxuries of life than preparing for the future. As Victor entered adulthood, he attended one of the most prestigious universities, where he studied business and finance. His time at university was marked by an intense dedication to his studies. While his peers partied and enjoyed the freedoms of university life, Victor was focused on building the foundation for his future. He networked with influential professors, participated in exclusive internships, and began to form connections with future business leaders. These years were crucial in shaping Victor's worldview and reinforcing his belief that success was achieved through power and control. Upon graduating with top honors, Victor wasted no time in entering the business world. He quickly established himself as a formidable force in the corporate arena, using his family's connections and his own talents to rise through the ranks. He was known for his ruthless tactics, often outmaneuvering competitors with cold precision. His reputation as a shrewd and calculating businessman grew, and so did his empire. By his early 30s, Victor had expanded the Harrington holdings into new industries, including technology and real estate, further solidifying his position as one of the most powerful men in the country. But with power came a growing sense of isolation. Victor's relentless pursuit of success left little room for personal relationships. His few attempts at romance were fleeting, often ending in disappointment as he struggled to connect with women who were more interested in his wealth than in him as a person. This only fueled his desire to control every aspect of his life, including his relationships. Victor began to view people as assets or liabilities, tools to be used in his quest for dominance. His world became increasingly insular, revolving around his work and his obsession with maintaining control. Maya Laurent, on the other hand, came from a world far removed from Victor's. Her early life was a stark contrast to the luxury and privilege of the Harringtons. Born in a small, working-class town, Maya grew up in a modest household where every penny was accounted for. Her father, a factory worker, and her mother, a homemaker, did their best to provide for Maya and her siblings. But money was always tight. From a young age, Maya learned the value of hard work and perseverance. She was a bright and ambitious child, determined to escape the cycle of poverty that had trapped her family for generations. Maya's childhood was marked by struggle and sacrifice. Her parents worked long hours to make ends meet, often leaving Maya to care for her younger siblings. Despite these challenges, she excelled in school, where she found solace in books and learning. Her teachers recognized her potential and encouraged her to aim high, but the realities of her family's financial situation often felt like an insurmountable barrier. Maya knew that if she wanted to achieve her dreams, she would have to find a way out of her small town. After graduating high school with honors, Maya set her sights on the big city. She had always dreamed of living in a place where opportunities were endless, where she could reinvent herself and pursue her ambitions. With little more than a few $100s saved from part-time jobs and a burning desire to succeed, Maya packed her bags and moved to New York City. The city was everything she had imagined: vibrant, chaotic, and full of possibilities. But it was also unforgiving, and Maya quickly realized that making it on her own would be far more difficult than she had anticipated. In New York, Maya faced a harsh reality. The cost of living was astronomical, and finding a decent job without a college degree proved to be nearly impossible. She worked a series of low-paying jobs, often struggling to make rent and keep food on the table. The pressure was immense, and there were times when Maya considered giving up and returning home. But her pride and determination kept her going. She refused to let her circumstances define her, clinging to the belief that she could carve out a better life for herself. As the months passed, Maya's situation grew increasingly desperate. She was barely scraping by, living in a tiny, run-down apartment in a dangerous part of town. It was during this time that she was introduced to the world of sugar dating. A friend suggested it as a way to make quick money, explaining that wealthy men were willing to pay for the companionship of attractive young women. At first, Maya was hesitant. The idea of trading her company for financial support felt wrong, but as her bills piled up and her options dwindled, she began to reconsider. Maya's entry into the world of sugar dating was tentative at first. She created a profile on a dating site, describing herself as a struggling young woman looking for a mentor. Within days, she was inundated with messages from older, wealthy men offering to take care of her in exchange for her companionship. The offers were tempting: expensive gifts, luxury vacations, and financial security. But Maya was careful to vet the men she met. She was looking for someone who could provide stability without demanding too much in return, someone who could help her navigate the complexities of life in New York. It wasn't long before Maya met Victor Harrington. Their first encounter was at an upscale restaurant, a world away from the dingy diners Maya had become accustomed to. Victor was everything she had imagined a powerful man would be: confident, sophisticated, and impeccably dressed. He exuded an aura of control that both intimidated and intrigued Maya. Over dinner, Victor shared stories of his business conquests, his sharp wit and intelligence on full display. Maya was captivated by his charm and the ease with which he navigated the world of wealth and power. Victor, in turn, was drawn to Maya's beauty and her apparent vulnerability. She was different from the other women he had dated. Less polished, perhaps, but with a raw, unrefined quality that intrigued him. He saw in her someone who could be molded, shaped into the perfect companion. Their relationship began as a mutually beneficial arrangement. Victor provided Maya with financial support and introduced her to a lifestyle she could only have dreamed of, while Maya offered Victor the companionship he craved without the complications of a traditional relationship. As their relationship developed, Victor began to exert more control over Maya's life. He insisted on managing her finances, paying her rent, and buying her clothes. At first, Maya welcomed the attention and the security it provided, but as time went on, she started to feel suffocated by Victor's controlling nature. He dictated where she went, who she saw, and how she spent her time. What had started as a mutually beneficial arrangement was beginning to feel more like a gilded cage, and Maya's initial excitement turned to unease. Despite the growing tension, Victor and Maya's relationship continued to evolve. Victor introduced Maya to his world of luxury: lavish parties, high-end shopping sprees, and exclusive social events. Maya was dazzled by the attention and the trappings of wealth, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing herself in the process. She missed the independence she had fought so hard to achieve, and the more Victor tried to control her, the more she resisted. Victor, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly possessive. He had grown accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he wasn't about to let Maya slip through his fingers. His business success had been built on his ability to control every aspect of his life, and he approached his relationship with Maya in the same way. He viewed her growing restlessness as a challenge to his authority, something that needed to be managed and contained. The more Maya pulled away, the tighter Victor's grip became. As Maya's dissatisfaction grew, she began to seek solace outside of her relationship with Victor. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones, including Leo Carter, a struggling artist with whom she felt an instant connection. Leo was everything Victor was not: easygoing, passionate, and free-spirited. He represented the life Maya had always wanted, a life of creativity and freedom, unencumbered by the demands of wealth and power. As her relationship with Leo deepened, Maya found herself increasingly torn between the security Victor provided and the freedom Leo offered. Victor, of course, was quick to notice the change in Maya. His jealousy and possessiveness flared as he watched her grow closer to Leo. For Victor, losing control of Maya was not an option. He began to monitor her movements more closely, questioning her about where she had been and who she had been with. The tension between them escalated, leading to frequent arguments and emotional outbursts. Maya felt trapped, caught between her fear of Victor's wrath and her desire for a life of her own. The situation reached a boiling point when Maya finally made the decision to leave Victor. She couldn't continue living under his control, and she realized that the only way to reclaim her life was to walk away. But breaking free from Victor was easier said than done. He was not a man who took rejection lightly, and the thought of losing Maya to another man drove him to the edge. In his mind, if he couldn't have her, no one could. What followed was a terrifying descent into obsession and revenge, as Victor plotted to ensure that if Maya left him, it would be on his terms, even if it meant taking her life. The seeds of Victor's revenge were sown in the dark recesses of his mind, where his need for control and power had always dominated. But now that need had twisted into something far more sinister, setting the stage for a harrowing and deadly confrontation. Maya's decision to leave Victor was not made lightly. It was the culmination of months of inner turmoil and fear, and it took every ounce of courage she had to finally break free from his suffocating grip. The final straw came after yet another heated argument, where Victor had accused her of being ungrateful, of not appreciating the life he had given her. His words had cut deep, but they also crystallized her realization that she was living in a prison of his making. The wealth, the luxury, the security, all of it was meaningless if it came at the cost of her freedom and happiness. Maya knew that leaving Victor would not be easy. He was a man who was used to getting what he wanted, and she was all too aware of the lengths he would go to maintain control. She had seen flashes of his darker side before, the cold, calculating way he dealt with those who crossed him in business, the subtle but unmistakable threats he used to keep people in line. She had always been careful not to provoke him, to keep the peace. But now she was stepping into uncharted territory. The thought of what he might do once he realized she was serious about leaving sent chills down her spine. The night she decided to leave, Maya packed a small bag with only the essentials. She didn't want to take anything that would tie her to the life she was leaving behind. She had saved just enough money to get by for a few weeks, hoping it would be enough to start over. Her plan was to stay with a friend temporarily while she figured out her next steps. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the best she could come up with under the circumstances. Maya waited until Victor was out of town on a business trip to make her move. She knew she had to act quickly. If he found out what she was planning, there was no telling what he might do. As she quietly slipped out of the penthouse apartment they shared, Maya felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She was terrified of what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she also felt a glimmer of hope. She was taking control of her life, and that alone was worth the risk. Victor's reaction to Maya's disappearance was immediate and furious. When he returned to find her gone, it was as if a switch had been flipped inside him. The calm, composed exterior he usually maintained shattered, revealing the depths of his obsession and rage. He tried calling her, but her phone was off. He contacted her friends, her family, anyone who might know where she was, but no one could or would give him any information. The more elusive she became, the more desperate and angry Victor grew. In Victor's mind, Maya's decision to leave wasn't just an act of defiance, it was a personal betrayal of the highest order. He had given her everything: wealth, security, a life most people could only dream of. And this was how she repaid him? The idea that she could simply walk away from him was unacceptable. Victor had always viewed people as assets, as things to be acquired, controlled, and used as he saw fit. Maya was no different, and the thought of losing her was something he could not tolerate. Victor's initial attempts to locate Maya were methodical and calculated. He hired private investigators, combed through her phone records, and monitored her bank accounts for any sign of activity. But Maya had been careful. She had withdrawn cash before she left and had avoided using any traceable means of communication. Weeks went by with no leads, and Victor's frustration grew. The more elusive Maya became, the more obsessed Victor became with finding her. It wasn't just about getting her back. It was about reasserting his control, about proving to himself and to her that he was the one in charge. As Victor's desperation intensified, so did his resolve. He began to entertain darker thoughts, thoughts that had once been unthinkable even to him. If he couldn't have Maya, then no one else would. The idea of her being with someone else, living a life without him, was more than he could bear. In Victor's twisted logic, it was better for Maya to be dead than for her to live a life that didn't include him. And so, with chilling determination, Victor began to plot his revenge. Victor's plan was as meticulous as it was malevolent. He knew that if he were to eliminate Maya, it had to be done in a way that would not implicate him directly. He could not afford to have his reputation or his freedom jeopardized by a messy scandal. To that end, Victor began to reach out to the darker elements of society, people who specialized in making problems disappear. Through his extensive network of contacts, he was introduced to a man known only as the Fixer. The Fixer was a shadowy figure, a man who operated in the underworld, taking on jobs that required a certain level of discretion and ruthlessness. The Fixer was not cheap, but Victor was willing to pay whatever it took to ensure that Maya was permanently out of his life. Over a series of secret meetings, Victor laid out his plan. Maya was to be eliminated, but it had to look like an accident, something that would arouse no suspicion. The Fixer listened carefully, asking detailed questions about Maya's habits, her routines, and the places she frequented. He assured Victor that he could handle the job, but he made it clear that once the plan was set in motion, there would be no turning back. Victor, blinded by his obsession, readily agreed. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The Fixer wasted no time in putting the plan into action. He began by gathering information on Maya's whereabouts, tracking her movements through a network of informants and surveillance. It wasn't long before he discovered that Maya had been in contact with Leo Carter, the artist she had befriended. The Fixer saw this as the perfect opportunity to strike, knowing that Maya would likely let her guard down when she was with someone she trusted. The plan was simple but effective. Maya and Leo often took long drives together, escaping the city to explore the countryside. The Fixer arranged for a staged car accident, one that would leave no survivors. He tampered with the brakes of Leo's car, ensuring that they would fail at a critical moment, sending the vehicle careening off the road and into a ravine. It was a plan that had been executed countless times before, always with the same deadly result. On the day of the planned attack, Maya and Leo set out for a drive, unaware of the danger that awaited them. They chatted and laughed as they drove along winding country roads, oblivious to the fact that their lives were about to be shattered. The Fixer, who had been following them at a distance, watched as they approached a particularly treacherous stretch of road. As they rounded a sharp curve, the brakes failed just as planned. The car swerved wildly, careening off the road and tumbling down the steep embankment. For a moment, everything went silent. The Fixer watched through binoculars as the car lay crumpled at the bottom of the ravine. There was no movement, no sign of life. Satisfied that the job was done, he turned and left, confident that he had completed his task. Maya and Leo were supposed to be dead, their lives snuffed out in a tragic accident that would raise no suspicion. But fate had other plans. Miraculously, Maya survived the crash, though she was severely injured. Leo, however, was not as lucky. He died on impact, leaving Maya alone and traumatized in the wreckage. It was hours before help arrived, and by then, Maya was barely clinging to life. She was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery. Her survival was nothing short of miraculous, and it wasn't long before the authorities began to question the circumstances surrounding the accident. Detective Grace Harper was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator with a keen eye for detail, Harper quickly realized that something about the crash didn't add up. The damage to the car was too severe for a simple brake failure, and there were other inconsistencies that pointed to foul play. Harper began to dig deeper, uncovering a trail of evidence that led back to Victor Harrington. As Harper's investigation progressed, she discovered the connection between Victor and the fixer. It was a dangerous and delicate situation, one that required careful handling. Harper knew that Victor was a powerful man with connections that could make her life difficult, but she was determined to see justice done. She began to gather evidence, piece by piece, building a case that would eventually bring Victor to trial. Victor, meanwhile, was unaware that his carefully constructed plan was beginning to unravel. He believed that Maya was dead, that his problem had been solved. But when he received word that she had survived, his world came crashing down. Panic set in as he realized the implications. If Maya survived, she could expose everything. His obsession had driven him to the brink, and now it was all falling apart. The weeks that followed were a blur of fear and desperation for Victor. He tried to cover his tracks, to eliminate any evidence that could tie him to the attempted murder, but it was too late. Harper was closing in, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. When Victor was finally arrested, the media frenzy was intense. The story of the wealthy businessman who had tried to have his lover killed shocked the nation. And Victor's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Maya, still recovering from her injuries, watched from the sidelines as the man who had once controlled her life was brought to justice. It was a bittersweet victory. She had survived, but at a great cost. Leo was gone, and the trauma of what she had endured would stay with her forever. But Maya was determined to move forward, to rebuild her life and honor Leo's memory. She knew that she could never fully escape the shadow of what had happened, but she was determined not to let it define her. Victor, on the other hand, was left to face the consequences of his actions. His once impenetrable facade had crumbled, and he was now a broken man, stripped of his power and influence. In the end, his obsession had destroyed him, leaving him with nothing but the hollow satisfaction of knowing that he had been brought down by the very thing he had tried so desperately to control. The resolution of the case brought a sense of closure, but also a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and obsession. It was a story that would be told and retold, a cautionary tale of how the pursuit of control can lead to one's ultimate downfall. Maya, for her part, emerged from the ordeal stronger and more resilient, ready to start a new chapter of her life, free from the shadows of her past. As the legal process against Victor Harrington unfolded, the courtroom became a stage for one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory. The media coverage was relentless, with every detail of the case being scrutinized and analyzed by pundits, legal experts, and the public alike. Victor, once a towering figure of power and influence, now found himself at the mercy of a justice system he had long believed to be beneath him. The charges against him were severe: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and a litany of other crimes related to his orchestration of the plot against Maya Laurent. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Samuel Keating, built a formidable case against Victor. Keating was known for his tenacity and had a reputation for taking down powerful figures who believed themselves to be untouchable. He approached the case with a clear strategy: to show that Victor's actions were not just a momentary lapse in judgment, but the result of a deeply rooted sense of entitlement and a dangerous belief that his wealth and power placed him above the law. Keating meticulously laid out the evidence, including phone records, bank transactions, and testimony from key witnesses, all of which painted a damning picture of Victor's descent into obsession and criminality. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from the fixer, the shadowy figure Victor had hired to carry out the murder. In exchange for a reduced sentence, the fixer agreed to testify against Victor, providing detailed accounts of their meetings and the instructions he had received. His testimony was chilling, describing Victor's calm and methodical demeanor as he planned Maya's death. The courtroom was riveted as the fixer recounted how Victor had stressed the need for discretion, how he had wanted the murder to look like an accident, and how he had shown no remorse when discussing the potential loss of human life. Maya Laurent's testimony was another crucial moment in the trial. Despite her physical and emotional scars, Maya took the stand with a resolve that commanded respect. Her voice trembled at times, but there was an undeniable strength in her words as she recounted her relationship with Victor, the fear she had lived with, and the terror she had felt when she realized he was capable of ending her life. Maya described how Victor's control over her had gradually tightened, how she had felt increasingly isolated and powerless, and how she had finally made the decision to leave him, never imagining that it would lead to such a violent and horrific outcome. The defense, led by Victor's high-powered legal team, attempted to undermine the credibility of the witnesses and cast doubt on the evidence. They argued that the fixer was an unreliable witness, motivated by a desire to save himself, and that Maya's account was colored by her own fear and trauma, making her testimony less objective. They portrayed Victor as a man who had made mistakes, but who was ultimately a victim of circumstance, manipulated by those around him into actions that were out of character. However, their arguments struggled to gain traction in the face of the overwhelming evidence and the clear narrative of Victor's calculated and premeditated actions. Throughout the trial, Victor maintained a stoic demeanor, rarely showing emotion. But as the days wore on and the evidence against him mounted, there were moments when his composure seemed to crack, an involuntary twitch, a tightening of the jaw, a flicker of anger in his eyes. It became increasingly clear that Victor was a man who had lost control, not just of the situation, but of himself. The very traits that had made him so successful in business, his ability to manipulate, to strategize, to dominate, had also led to his downfall. His obsession with control had spiraled into a dark and destructive force, consuming him from the inside out. The trial reached its climax with the closing arguments. District Attorney Keating delivered a powerful summation, urging the jury to see Victor for what he truly was, a man who believed that his wealth and status entitled him to play with the lives of others. Keating emphasized that justice demanded accountability, that Victor Harrington's actions could not go unpunished simply because of who he was. The defense, in their final plea, attempted once more to humanize Victor, to present him as a man who had been pushed to the brink, who had acted out of desperation and love. But the words rang hollow in the face of the evidence. After deliberating for several days, the jury returned with a verdict. Victor Harrington was found guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions: satisfaction, relief, and for some, a sense of vindication. Victor, for his part, showed little reaction as the verdict was read. It was as if he had already resigned himself to his fate, knowing that there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. The sentencing was swift and decisive. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Maya, the verdict brought a sense of closure, but it was far from a complete resolution. The emotional and psychological scars from her ordeal were deep, and they would take time to heal. She had lost so much: her sense of security, her trust in others, and most painfully, Leo, the man who had shown her what true love and freedom could be. Yet despite the pain, Maya was determined to move forward, to rebuild her life on her own terms. In the months following the trial, Maya focused on her recovery. She attended therapy to help process the trauma and began to reconnect with friends and family, gradually allowing herself to open up about what she had been through. Maya also found solace in her art, pouring her emotions into painting and writing, using creativity as a means of healing. The support from those who cared about her, as well as the sense of justice that came from seeing Victor held accountable, gave her the strength to start anew. Maya's journey of rebuilding was not easy. There were days when the weight of what she had experienced felt almost too heavy to bear, when the memories of the crash, the loss of Leo, and the terror of being hunted by someone she once trusted threatened to overwhelm her. But Maya was resilient. She refused to let her past define her future. She knew that moving forward didn't mean forgetting what had happened, but rather finding a way to live with it, to integrate the experience into her life in a way that made her stronger. As Maya slowly reclaimed her life, she also began to reflect on the lessons she had learned. She realized how important it was to trust her instincts, to recognize the warning signs of control and manipulation early on. She became an advocate for others who had experienced similar forms of abuse and control, using her story to raise awareness about the dangers of toxic relationships and the importance of self-empowerment. Maya's strength and courage became an inspiration to many, a beacon of hope for those who had felt powerless in their own lives. Meanwhile, Victor Harrington's life in prison was a stark contrast to the opulent existence he had once known. Stripped of his wealth, power, and influence, Victor was just another inmate, subject to the same rules and restrictions as everyone else. The transition was brutal for a man who had spent his entire life exerting control over others. The prison environment, with its rigid hierarchy and unyielding structure, was a constant reminder of the control he had lost. Over time, Victor became a shadow of his former self, consumed by bitterness and regret. The themes of power, control, and obsession that had driven Victor's actions were central to his downfall. His belief that he could manipulate the world to fit his desires, that he could bend people to his will without consequence, had ultimately destroyed him. The case served as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the destructive potential of obsession. It highlighted how the pursuit of control, when taken to its extreme, can lead to the loss of everything that makes life meaningful: freedom, love, and connection. Maya's story, on the other hand, was one of resilience and transformation. Her journey from victim to survivor was marked by a profound inner strength, a refusal to be defined by the worst moments of her life. Through her experiences, Maya came to understand the importance of self-worth, of valuing herself not for what others could give her, but for who she was as an individual. Her growth from someone who was initially drawn to the security that Victor offered to someone who chose to stand on her own was a testament to the power of personal agency and the human spirit's capacity to overcome even the darkest of circumstances. In the end, the story of Victor and Maya was not just a tale of crime and punishment, but a deeper exploration of the human condition. It examined the corrosive effects of power when wielded without empathy or restraint, and the ways in which control can destroy not only those who are subjected to it, but also those who seek to impose it. At the same time, it celebrated the resilience of those who, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, find the strength to reclaim their lives and forge a path forward. Maya's life after Victor's conviction was not without challenges, but it was a life she had chosen for herself. A life defined by her own values, her own dreams, and her own sense of purpose. She continued to honor Leo's memory by pursuing her artistic passions and by helping others who had suffered as she had. Maya knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but she also knew that she had the strength to walk it, no matter what challenges might arise. In the quiet moments when the memories of the past threatened to resurface, Maya would remind herself of how far she had come. She would look at the paintings she had created, each one a reflection of her journey, and she would feel a sense of pride in what she had overcome. The scars she bore, both physical and emotional, were a testament to her survival, a reminder that she was more than what had happened to her. She was a survivor, a fighter, and above all, someone who had reclaimed her life from the shadows of her past.